Shen Changyao and I were childhood sweethearts, deeply in love, the envy of all, until that night when he coaxed me into drinking a bowl of sweet soup, and the next day I woke up in a strange man's bed, and my husband, dressed in red robes, gained high official rank and noble status, riding a white horse to marry a noble lady from a prominent family. Opening my eyes again, I looked at the strange man with whom I had shared a fleeting moment of pleasure and slowly, seductively wrapped myself around him. In my past life, he only desired my flesh, but in this life, desire flickers in his eyes and brows. He asked me what I wanted. I said, I want Shen Changyao to fall from a great height. I want him shattered to pieces. Lady Shen, would you be willing to follow this Marquis? A hoarse, deep male voice sounded in the room. Terrified, I tightly gripped the quilt, staring at the tall man sitting against the light. Red silk curtains and warm bedding filled the room with an intimate, suggestive atmosphere, the air thick with a scent that stirred the imagination. I stared blankly at the scene before me, feeling a wave of confusion. With the slightest movement, aches throughout my body reminded me of the wildness of the previous night. But I clearly remembered I had already died. I remembered how Shen Changyao's wife had pushed me into the lotus pond. At that time, the child in my womb was only 4 months old. 2 lives lost, sinking together into the murky water. Silence reigned so profound one could hear a pin drop. I looked at the man. In my previous life, I only learned later that his name was Zhao Yang, a close confidant of the emperor and the Marquis of Wuhan. On the second day of my previous life, he had asked me the same question, Madam Shen, are you willing to come with me? But how had I answered him back then? I looked at the bruises and marks all over my body, overwhelmed with shame, and threatened to kill myself to beg him to let me go. At that time, Zhao Yang slightly turned his head to look at me, his well-defined knuckles clenched into fists behind his back. He coldly and calmly scanned me, remained silent for a long moment, then turned and walked away with his hands behind his back. Not long after, Shen Changyao came to pick me up from the Marquis residence, in the carriage. He violently cleaned the traces left by another man on my body with his lips and tongue, his resentful gaze lingering on me for a long time. I pulled out the dagger that Marquis Wuhan had thrown to me and stabbed Shen Changyao fiercely, but unfortunately, I failed to kill him. I want to divorce him. But he knelt on the ground, stabbing himself with a knife, each strike carefully avoiding vital spots, begging me to forgive him just once, refusing to let me go even in death. He locked me in the room, guarding me day and night. At night, he would both obsess over my body and despise me for being tainted. Later, I became pregnant, and by my calculations, the child was that of the Marquis of Wuhan. Shen Changyao forbade me from terminating the pregnancy and forced me to carry the child to term. Yet, every day, he would stare gloomily at my abdomen, sending chills down my spine. His mother used this to humiliate me, accusing me of being unchaste and impure, calling me a wanton and promiscuous woman. The Shen family could not tolerate a disgraced official wife, so I was forced to become Shen Changyao's concubine. His new wife, the daughter of the Grand Tutor, came with her maids on the second day after entering the household and demanded that I serve her tea. The scalding hot tea was accidentally spilled all over me. She laughed triumphantly and said, "You were slept with by some random man and are even carrying his bastard. My husband is kind-hearted, remembering the years of affection between you two, and still allows you to be a concubine. You should burn incense and pray, wishing the Shen family prosperity and blessings, so that a lowly woman like you can have a place to save face. Years of affection, it's time to repay it properly." Shen Changyao was my father's most accomplished student. I met him during our humble beginnings. From a young age, he was exceptionally brilliant, achieving 6 consecutive victories from the county exams to the palace exams, earning the top honors in all 3 levels. I met Shen Changyao when I was 13. That year, he came from the south of the Yangtze River and knocked on our wooden door. He stood on the stone steps, dressed in a plain white robe, his face stern and composed. The spring breeze brushed against his sleeves, and the golden light filtered through the tree canopy, casting a gentle glow on his slender shoulders. The young man's broad shoulders were held straight as he gave me a slight smile, even overshadowing the magnolia blossoms behind him. In that smile, I lost myself and stepped onto a path of no return. It was only in my past life that I learned how often scholars turn out to be heartless men. Shen Changyao, your path to the top was paved with my father's countless nights spent writing by lamplight, pouring his heart and soul into every word. It was also marked by my own figure kneeling through wind and snow on the 99 steps of Puji Temple, praying to the Buddha for your protection. But what did over a decade of kindness and affection earn me in return? What you gained in return was the cold-blooded heartlessness of handing over your wife to another man. What you gained in return was allowing your elderly mother and new wife to humiliate and persecute me, leading to my death along with our unborn child sinking to the bottom of the pond. What you gained in return was the tragedy of my father, unable to bear the humiliation, who in his fury let go of this life. I lowered my head, replaying the scenes from my past life in my mind. My heart felt as if it were being squeezed, making it hard to breathe. Unresolved resentment and bitterness pressed down on me relentlessly, leaving me no choice but to let my tears fall onto the quilt embroidered with fiery red pomegranates. Zhao Yang said coldly, "If you don't want to, then forget it. Stop crying." I lifted my head, gently wiping away the tear stains on my face with my fingers, then curled the corners of my lips into a smile as enchanting as a fox spirit. Beneath the thin quilt, my body was completely bare. I pulled the quilt higher and tentatively stretched out my pale, bruised right hand toward him, my voice soft. "Sir, Shen Changyao's wife died yesterday, didn't she?" The man standing before the bed was momentarily stunned by my words, then reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm and broad, calloused from years of martial arts practice. He took a step closer, suddenly bending down right in front of me. I was so frightened that I pressed myself tightly against the wall. His eyes, like those of an eagle or a wolf, were impossible to ignore, cold, sharp, and filled with a dark, guarded intensity, as piercing as a thin blade. Across 2 lifetimes, it was only at this moment that I truly saw what Zhao Yang looked like. He had a cold, hard face with sharp, defined features. His sword-like eyebrows slanted sharply toward his temples, and his fierce, piercing eyes carried a murderous aura. As for his figure beneath the brocade robe, although I was drugged last night, I still clearly remembered his robust build and solid muscles, his broad shoulders straight, his tight, wasp-like waist powerful and strong. He and Shen Changyao are completely different. One is as clear, cold, and gentle as a river, while the other is a wild, aloof lone wolf. Zhao Yang, like a wolf, brushed his rough fingers over my brows, the tip of my nose, and finally rested them on my chapped lips from last night, whispering in a low voice, "Tomorrow, I will have Shen Changyao announce your death. From now on, there will be no Jiang Qingyu in this world." With that said, I understood clearly no man would openly claim another man's wife. My left hand, hidden beneath the covers, was clenched tightly, my palm already damp with sweat. I clenched and unclenched my fist repeatedly before finally making up my mind. Gritting my teeth, I straightened up, leaned in, and gently pressed a kiss to his cheek. Zhao Yang's body visibly stiffened for a moment. He slowly turned to look at me, and perhaps it was my imagination, but the cold indifference in his eyes seemed to soften briefly, and the corners of his lips lifted almost imperceptibly. I was about to say something more when a voice came from outside the door. "Lord Marquis, Lord Shen is here to pick up his wife." My face instantly paled for a moment, and I stole a glance at Zhao Yang's expression, only to see that he had returned to his previous cold sternness. He straightened up, looked down at me, and said in an unreadable tone, Shun Changyao said yesterday that as long as he comes to pick you up, you will inevitably go back with him. What will you do? What will I do? So in both my past and present lives, Shun Changyao has always thought this way. He has me in his grasp, thinking that as long as he is willing, I would eagerly and gratefully follow him. As I pondered this, I softened my voice and said, Marquis, if you don't want me anymore, just give me a cup of poisoned wine, don't push me to the Shun family. Zhao Yang picked up the clothes from the side, threw them onto the bed, and walked out, closing the door with his foot. I picked up the clothes on the bed. They were all newly made, crafted from precious materials I could never afford. He wanted me to go out and meet Shun Changyao with him. I had no idea what Zhao Yang was up to. Could it be that he intended to use me to humiliate Shun Changyao? I originally had no intention of seeing him, but it's just as well, in this second life. I want to see with my own eyes how that upright and noble gentleman, under the weight of power, grovels and begs like a dog. The spring clothing was as thin as a cicada's wings, with large peonies and emerald green gauze in a misty blue cloud pattern, and layers of crimson silk skirt fluttering in a magnificent and dazzling display. For a moment, my eyes were captivated. In truth, I have always had a preference for rich and vibrant colors. My features are already striking and intense, and the more resplendent and dazzling the attire, the more it complements me. It was about a few years ago that Shun Changyao, under the influence of alcohol, revealed his true feelings, saying he didn't want others to catch a glimpse of my appearance and didn't want me to stand out too much. From then on, I began to adopt a more simple and elegant style of dressing, often wearing tea-white clothes year-round. But now, Zhao Yang has prepared such vibrant and eye-catching clothes for me. So, what exactly does he like? My long hair was tied up with a gold filigree ruby hairpin, revealing my slender, fair neck. If only I could ignore the marks on it. Never mind, suppressing the discomfort in my body, I pushed the door open with one hand. At first glance, I saw Zhao Yang outside the door. He was leaning against the round wooden pillar with his arms crossed, his eyes closed as he rested. A man as alert as him must have heard the sound of me opening the door. Yet he remained as still as a meditating monk, exuding an aura that kept others at a distance. I tightened my grip on my skirt, doing my best to overcome the fear in my heart, and moved toward him step by step. When I got close to him, I initially intended to reach out and touch him as a gesture of goodwill and closeness, but I noticed my outstretched hand trembling slightly, so I withdrew it and simply looked up at him, calling out softly. The next second, he opened his eyes and looked down at me. For a moment, his gaze seemed to dim, and a fleeting emotion passed by too quickly for me to grasp before it vanished. From the room to the front hall, one had to pass through several covered corridors. Zhao Yang walked ahead, with his tall and sturdy build. Each of his steps was equivalent to two of mine. The torment from the previous night had left me somewhat uncomfortable while walking, and before I had even made it halfway, I was already feeling exhausted. I didn't dare ask him to slow down, so I gritted my teeth and followed. After a while, for some reason, his pace gradually slowed down. Seizing the chance to catch my breath, I finally felt a little better. Along the way, most of my thoughts revolved around how to please this man. He was so stern, humorless, and rigid. Would he really be captivated by matters of intimacy? After all, in my past life, he had never been with a woman. Nor had I ever heard of him having any lovers or engagements. Gazing at the man's figure ahead, I even had the audacity to entertain another thought. Once this was all over, I would run away, far, far away. Approaching the front hall, Zhao Yang suddenly stopped in his tracks. Just as I nearly collided with his back, he seemed to have eyes on the back of his head, raising his palm to press against my forehead, preventing me from crashing straight into his iron-like shoulder and back. I instinctively took a step back, but because my layered skirt was so cumbersome, I was too busy looking down and missed the momentary stiffness in Zhao Yang's eyes. He had stopped because he changed his mind. Originally, he was supposed to take me to see Shen Chongyao, but for some reason, he suddenly changed his plan and led me to the screen behind the main hall. He summoned several maids. The maids of the Marquis's residence were well trained, and in no time, a soft couch and an assortment of snacks and tea were properly arranged behind the screen. Zhao Yang walked out from behind the screen, and I stared at his back, lost in thought. Only when the voices from the front hall reached my ears did I realize this spot offered a clear view of everything happening ahead. The moment I heard Shen Chongyao's voice, my mind tightened like a drawn bowstring, filled with nothing but the urge to skin him alive in vengeance. My nails dug so deeply into the wooden table beside me that they nearly snapped until the maid at my side swiftly pulled my hand free. I glanced at her, withdrew my hand, and turned a cold gaze forward. At this moment, Zhao Yang had his back to me, sitting in the chair at the head of the room. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could take in every move Shen Chongyao made. So this was how he looked when he came to demand me in the previous life, so certain, without a trace of remorse. Even his words sounded as if he held all the cards. Shen Chongyao's voice, usually clear and mellow, now carried a hint of hoarseness. Marquis, yesterday my wife and I came here for the banquet. We had too much to drink and ended up staying overnight at your residence. Today, we won't trouble you any further. Minister Shen, you must be mistaken. There is no wife of yours in my residence. Zhao Yang leaned back in his armchair, casually toying with a tourmaline teacup in his left hand. Shen Chongyao was originally bowing with his hands clasped, but upon hearing this, he abruptly raised his head and stared directly at Zhao Yang. I saw his face turn deathly pale, almost ashen. Outside, the originally bright sky suddenly darkened, thick clouds rolling in and pressing down heavily. Shen Chongyao's figure swayed for a moment in the flickering light and shadow, but in the blink of an eye, he steadied himself firmly. His hands, hidden in his sleeves, had long been clenched into fists. With bloodshot eyes, he knelt on the ground and pleaded, "Marquis, you promised, just one night, and you would return my wife to me. You said if she was unwilling, you wouldn't force her." Zhao Yang, who had been calm and composed earlier, now felt inexplicably agitated. "She is unwilling." Shen Chongyao visibly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Thank you, Marquis. She is unwilling, but only unwilling to go back with you." Zhao Yang continued, "Impossible," Shen Chongyao blurted out. Zhao Yang impatiently threw something onto the ground. It was the jade pendant Shen Chongyao had given me as a token of love, which I had handed to him on the way. With that throw, the piece of jade shattered into several fragments. "This is to repay you. I want to see the Shen family hold a funeral within tomorrow." Shen Chongyao seemed half mad as he crawled over, gathering the shattered jade in his hands. No one knew what he was thinking with his head lowered, but after a moment of silence, he turned his face, his brows and eyes tinged with a ruthless determination, and asked in a low voice, "What about the vacancy of the Minister of Revenue?" Zhao Yang stood up, blocking my line of sight. He seemed to glance in my direction before saying, "That depends on how quickly you act tomorrow." I stood behind the screen, watching this absurd scene, and suddenly laughed silently. The light in my eyes faded bit by bit, and by the time my laughter subsided, tears had unknowingly slipped down, seeping into the blue brick floor beneath my feet. Zhao Yang stood before me. I lifted my gaze to look at him, directing a wave of hatred I couldn't conceal straight at him. He froze, then used his rough fingers to wipe away the tear stains on my face, speaking his first words to me today. "I'm sorry." I turned away, avoiding his hand, watching as his hand paused mid-air before silently withdrawing, as a woman who had just been given away by her husband last night, and now witnessing him trade me away today. This was exactly how I should behave, resentful and unwilling, yet utterly heartbroken. Would Zhao Yang like this? I don't know. I can only take it one step at a time. Right now, I have something more urgent on my mind. Following Zhao Yang's footsteps, I carefully tugged at his sleeve with a force so slight it was almost negligible. Yet he stopped immediately. He turned his head and looked down at me. I quickly withdrew my hand and said softly, "My lord." "May I see my father?" Seeing him frown, I added, "Just a private meeting. I won't let anyone see me. I'm just afraid that tomorrow's events might frighten him." He didn't say whether he agreed or not, but instead asked, "Have you had breakfast?" I shook my head. He gave the order and strode off, saying, "We'll talk about other matters later. Let's eat first." I ate breakfast with a heart full of anxiety, half restless and half uncomfortable. Because of this, I completely failed to notice that almost all the dishes on the table were prepared according to my taste. Without Zhao Yang's permission, I couldn't leave the Marquis residence, so, after some thought, I decided to write a letter and have the maid by my side deliver it for me. She listens to Zhao Yang, and my affairs she will inevitably go to ask him first. As long as she goes to ask, even if the letter cannot be sent, it can remind him of this matter once more. Just as I picked up my pen, a servant came to report, "Madam, your father-in-law has arrived." My right hand, holding the pen, suddenly trembled, drawing a long line across the slightly yellowed paper. I stared at the paper for a long time before finally getting up and walking out. When I arrived, my father was standing with his back to the room, staring intently at the phoenix tree in the courtyard. Hearing the noise, he turned around. The years had silvered his temples, and as I looked at the travel-worn man before me, I burst into tears without caring about my appearance, sobbing, "Father." In my previous life, he had died in a fit of rage with no one by his side, and I was confined in the Shen family at that time, unable to even see him one last time. He had been stern-faced at first, but when he saw me crying, he immediately became flustered. "Qing, you, tell me, what exactly is going on? Who has bullied you? Where is Shen Changyao? Why did he leave you alone here, and why?" A gentleman compares his virtue to jade, bright, courteous, and clear, untainted by impurity. My father, praised by all for decades as a refined scholar and gentleman, how could he ever accept such a truth? So I said, "No, it's me. I've fallen for someone else and wish to divorce Shen Changyao." As a father, he might tolerate countless faults in his children, but he would never allow anyone to harm them. If he learned that Shen Changyao had wronged me, he would likely risk his life to seek justice for me. Therefore, before the matter is settled, if he were to find out how the Shen family had treated me, he might well tread the same path as in our past life. Better that he blame me instead, for my heartlessness, for my fickleness. Anything would be better. Jiang Qingyu. He was indeed furious, his fingers trembling slightly beneath his wide sleeves. "How have I taught you all these years? How could you be so heartless? Changyao treated you so well. He would have plucked the stars from the sky for you if he could. How could you bear to treat him like this? You see, Shen Changyao truly loved me, so much so that even my father was deceived by his act. No one knew that this love, when faced with power, was like dust in the wind, scattering at the slightest breeze." I lowered my head, pretending to be resentful. "Anyway, I really do like the Marquis, and I've already divorced Shen Changyao, but he probably can't accept it and would rather believe I'm dead. So if you hear any news of a funeral from the Shen family tomorrow, don't take it seriously. How could I? How could I have raised a daughter like you?" He raised his hand, then lowered it. Looking around for a stick, finally, he found a branch and was about to strike my arm. Just like when I was a child, I didn't mean to hide, but halfway through, the branch was intercepted by a large hand. That hand not only stopped the branch but also respectfully pushed it aside before pulling me behind him. Zhao Yang stood in front of me and calmly said, "Father-in-law." My father took 2 steps back, still holding the branch. "Marquis, don't call me that. I only have Shen Changyao as my son-in-law." Hearing this, Zhao Yang pressed his lips together and said nothing more, only adding, "Please don't hit her." I stepped out from behind him and continued, "Father, A wise bird chooses the right tree to perch on. I've met someone better and have escaped from a sea of suffering. This is a good thing. With Zhao Yang by my side, I didn't want to say more, so I just added a few more words to provoke my father. Later, my father left the Marquis's residence with a look of disappointment on his face. Before he left, I couldn't help but call out to him, but he didn't even bother to look back at me. I had done it on purpose all along, just to make him so angry that he would leave this place. Given his temperament, after such an incident, he would inevitably feel too ashamed to face Shen Changyao. Only then would he leave. Only if he goes far away from here can I be free from worries and attachments. The square courtyard was drenched in rain. On a rainy day, the roof tiles shimmered with a moist, flowing light, and the raindrops tapping on the countless overlapping tiles made the scene feel even more desolate and quiet. From yesterday's absurdities to today's events, I found it all a bit too much to bear. At that moment, I needed rest, so I feigned weakness and fainted, collapsing toward the man beside me and landing in a broad, warm embrace. I had only been pretending, but to my surprise, I ended up truly fainting. All I remember is that man scooping me up in his arms and walking with hurried steps. During my coma, I didn't sleep very peacefully. Vaguely, I always felt a pair of hands gently stroking my cheeks, restrained in strength, caressing me over and over again. Yet when I woke up, the room was empty. Outside the window, the sky had darkened. The air after the rain was filled with a damp, stifling heat. In the dim room, only a few candles were lit, occasionally crackling as the wicks burned. Sitting on the bed, I slowly bent over, hugged my knees, and let out a suppressed cry. Tears kept welling up, soaking the embroidered quilt, and no matter how much I wiped, they wouldn't stop. Only at this moment did I dare to calm my mind and think about all those days I had wasted, to hate the past, and to fear the days to come. Why did it have to be me? What did I do wrong to deserve all this? This world is so detestable. Everyone only cares about whether I am loyal to my husband, whether I remain pure and faithful, but no one cares that I am also a living person, not an object to be traded for power and desire. A soft sound came from the room, and I asked nervously, "Who's there?" A maid emerged from the shadows, looking somewhat flustered, and said, It's just me, there's no one else." I collected myself and asked her, a bit puzzled. "I didn't ask if there was anyone else." She kowtowed and said, Yes, I'm just a bit nervous. It's my first day serving you, madam, so I'm a bit on edge." "Do not call me madam." I got out of bed and sat in front of the mirror. After a moment's thought, I added, "The Marquis has not yet taken a wife, and in the future, there will be a proper lady of the house. Do not address me incorrectly." Naturally, I had no desire to become his concubine either. One day, he would surely grow tired of me, and by then, no matter where I fled, he likely wouldn't care. She seemed somewhat troubled, but, "This is enough," I interrupted her. "What is your name?" After a round of questioning, I roughly understood the situation of this Marquis household. Apart from Zhao Yang as the master, there were only a few servants and maids in the residence. Fortunately, the household was simple, and there were no elders, so I didn't need to deal with anyone else. The maid serving me was called Wu Mai. She seemed like an ordinary servant girl. But the maid who pulled my hand out this morning clearly had martial skills. It made sense, as Zhao Yang was originally a military officer. Over the years, he had faced life and death on the battlefield multiple times, and his residence had even been infiltrated by enemy spies. I was contemplating the possibility of having Zhao Yang cut Shen Changyao down with a single stroke. For some reason, I felt that as soon as I opened my mouth, Zhao Yang would grab his blade and go after him. But clearly, I wasn't that important to him. I was merely a plaything he took a fancy to in his leisure time, an object he acquired in exchange for another. Shen Changyao had been promoted and was a member of his faction, one of his capable subordinates. Where did I get such confidence? Fortunately, What I wanted was never for Shen Changyao to meet a swift death that would have been far too easy on him. The next day, the Shen residence indeed held a funeral. Wu Mei told me that Lord Shen knelt before the empty coffin in the morning hall, refusing to drink even a drop of water. I held a hairpin in my hand, turned my head to look at her, and wondered why Zhao Yang had her say this. What exactly did it mean? Where is the Marquis? I asked softly. Since yesterday, I haven't seen him at all. Could it be that after just 2 days, he's already grown tired of me? The Marquis went to the military camp early this morning. He said he has important matters these days and won't be returning to the residence much. He asked you, Madam, Miss, to rest assured and stay comfortably for the next few days. Zhao Yang indeed never returned to the estate. I waited anxiously every day, from dawn till dusk, but he never appeared. To avoid wasting time, I began inquiring about his daily preferences within the estate. Yet, no matter who I asked, no one seemed to know what he liked to eat, wear, or drink. His skilled maid Bai told me that the general faced constant dangers and had always been reserved by nature, unwilling to let others discover his preferences and exploit his weaknesses. Although Zhao Yang was nowhere to be seen for several days and there was no one in charge of the estate, the Marquis household remained in perfect order. Even the daily fruits were different each day, never repeating. Even without stepping outside, my clothes and accessories were delivered to my room in a variety of styles. I no longer waited idly for the rabbit to bump into the tree. Early that morning, I personally stayed in the kitchen, simmering a bowl of lotus root and pork rib soup and preparing a plate of Osman-thus cakes. Just as I was about to carry the food box to the military camp, Zhao Yang returned. When he entered the room, I was fiddling with the food box with my head lowered. Hearing the sound, I looked up. The man before me was dressed in a black narrow-sleeved riding outfit, his jet-black long hair tied back with a black hair ribbon, a crimson waistband tightly wrapped around his broad-shouldered, narrow-waisted figure. My fingers tightened around the lid of the food box. Meeting his cold gaze, I forced a smile and said, "My lord, I prepared some food for you. Would you like to try it?" He glanced down at the food box and said nothing. Turning around, he took out a white hat from the cabinet, silently lifted my face, placed the hat on my head, and carefully tied it under my chin. I had just started to speak when he crouched down and scooped me up by the waist. The tall red hair horse circled through several streets. The man behind me held me in front of him as the horse ran so fast that I felt I was about to be thrown off. Yet his large hand remained firmly clasped around my waist. I gritted my teeth and cursed him in my heart. Brute, brute. In a few breaths, the horse stopped beneath the city tower. He lifted me off the horse and leaped lightly onto the city wall. Looking at the scene on the long street, I finally understood what he wanted to show me. From Yubei Street, which exited through the East A Gate, a funeral procession approached head-on. The man at the front, dressed entirely in white, lowered his eyes, his expression desolate. I remembered today was the day of my funeral. After today, Jiang Qingyu would no longer exist in this world. Through the white veil, I tried to see the look in Shen Changyao's eyes at that moment. Pale paper money fluttered all over the sky, a few pieces blown onto the city tower by the wind. I reached out and caught the flying blossoms that celebrated my funeral, holding them in my hand and gently rubbing them. The two figures in white and black on the city tower did not attract anyone's attention. I watched for a long while, and even though my heart was calm, I felt an inexplicable restlessness. I turned my head, wanting to look at the man behind me. He held my body firmly in front of him, his thumb and forefinger gripping my chin, forcing me to look ahead. Zhao Yang bent down, his eyes dark and intense as he stared forward, his hot breath brushing against my ear. "Jiang Qingyu, look clearly. From now on, you have absolutely nothing to do with him." My heart skipped a beat, and I stared blankly ahead, sensing this was a good opportunity. So, I raised my hand and gently rested it on his hard, muscular forearm, feeling the heat and tension beneath my fingertips and palm. I whispered softly, "Marquis, Qingyu must thank you for allowing me to see the true nature of such an ungrateful and cold-hearted man. From now on, Qingyu will only follow you. As long as the Marquis does not despise me, I will have only you in my heart." The presence behind me paused for a long moment. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could feel his fingertips tracing my cheek. My heart raced. Even with Shen Changyao, I had never expressed my feelings so openly. Yet this man before me, I had only known him for a few days. At this thought, I felt a pang of regret. Perhaps, at this moment, I looked more like a shameless, wanton woman. Zhao Yang had a preference for married women. Perhaps he enjoyed the thrill of secrecy and coercion. Would my straightforward advances leave him unmoved? Fortunately, he moved. Zhao Yang withdrew his hand and drew me into his embrace. I heard a faint, almost imperceptible, "All right." The wind on the city tower was strong, scattering the sound for miles. I suspected I might have misheard but didn't dare ask, so I obediently let him hold me. Back at the estate, I followed Zhao Yang's side for the meal. And then he hurriedly rushed off to the military camp, leaving me no choice but to return to my room. Seeing the empty table in the room, I called for Wu Mai. "The food that was placed here this morning, where did it go? Why is it missing?" I had originally thought that since the food had gone cold, I might as well have someone take it away to be discarded. Without my instructions, no one in this room would have touched anything, which is why I asked in the first place, Wu Mei said. It was the Marquis who had it removed. I nodded and was about to dismiss her when she hesitated, seemingly wanting to say something. I told her to speak her mind. Only then did Wu Mei speak up. "The Marquis." Yangsheng said that the Marquis can't eat Osmanthus cakes, they give him a rash. So, Yangsheng was the young guard by Zhao Yang's side. I knew of him. He had been with Zhao Yang for over a decade. I made a mental note of this matter. Fortunately, he was busy and didn't have time to eat those things. Wu Mai attended to me by my side, while Bai Yu often came and went from the Marquis's residence. Much of the news from outside was brought to me by her, likely on Zhao Yang's instructions. Because of this, I learned that my father had indeed left the capital after that day. She didn't mention where he went, but I knew he must have returned to Wuhan County, where my mother was buried. The Shen family's funeral yesterday caused quite a stir. The common folk in the capital were discussing the Shen family's deep sense of loyalty and righteousness in the streets and alleys, as well as the profound love between Shen Changyao and his wife. However, in an unnoticed corner, Shen Changyao donned a crimson official robe, holding a ceremonial tablet as he stepped into the heart of imperial power. The chirping of cicadas and the croaking of frogs filled the drowsy night, with the crescent moon hanging high above the treetops. The mansion was lit up in the darkness, and in the quiet study, only suppressed gasps could be heard. I didn't know how to please Zhao Yang. He had neglected me for too long, only returning once or twice in a hurry. If I continued to stay silent in the rear courtyard, how would I ever carry out my plans? So today, while he was unusually busy in his study, I began to seduce him. He must have loved my body otherwise. Why would he have traded such a high-ranking position for just one night of pleasure? I had a little wine to boost my courage. When I pushed open the study door, my cheeks were already slightly flushed. I pressed my fingertips against the silk tassel at his waist, gave it a slight twist, and deftly untied the knot. Zhao Yang looked down at me, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with what seemed like clusters of flames. I wrapped my pale, smooth arms around his neck, lifted my face, and gently kissed and licked his Adam's apple. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his hand on the chair clench abruptly, from his tightly pressed lips to his high nose bridge and then to his deep-set eyes. I kissed my way along until he could no longer restrain himself, but at the last moment, I couldn't suppress my fear. The memories of that night surged over me like a tide, making my whole body tense. Instinctively, I pushed him away, whispering, "Don't." Zhao Yang was lying on top of me. Hearing this, his tall, sturdy body instantly stiffened. He lifted his head to look at me, the fiery, wolf-like intensity in his eyes fading abruptly into calm. He gazed at me deeply for a moment before rising and turning his back to me, straightening his clothes. "If you're unwilling, there's no need to force yourself. Just don't let there be a next time." He glanced at me sideways, his expression cold and stern. A stark contrast to the tenderness and affection he had shown just moments before. Zhao Yang left, leaving the study to me. There was a large bed in his study, the very one I was lying on now. My drunkenness had long since faded, and I sat dazedly on the bed, gazing at the moonlight outside the window, unsure of what to do for a moment. What was I even doing? Wanting to use someone, yet unwilling to give anything in return. It was then that I remembered when I kissed his neck earlier. I had vaguely noticed some red spots, as if a rash had just subsided, but I forgot to ask. I should have shown some concern. After that night, Zhao Yang began, for the first time ever, to stay at the residence every day. Even when he had to attend official duties or go to the military camp, he would always make it back on time to have meals with me. We tacitly avoided mentioning the events of that night, as I spent more and more time with him. I gradually figured out his preferences and began to subtly steer conversations in that direction. I went into his study and took several military strategy books, studying them diligently whenever I had free time, just so I could chat with him about them. I even read political and historical commentaries, occasionally glancing over while he handled official matters and offering a few insights. However, it seemed he didn't particularly like it when I spoke about these topics. I could sense that every time I deliberately tried to bring them up, he would avoid the subject. I began to wonder if I was saying too much or touching on confidential matters, and from then on, I became even more cautious with my words. On the contrary, when I occasionally mentioned a line or two about the calligraphy, paintings, or ancient zither music I liked, he would be much more delighted. He even recognized some famous artists' works and incomplete musical scores. And sometimes he would respond to my remarks. Then, pressing his lips together, he would look at me, and when I nodded, a flicker of light would appear in his eyes for a moment. Could it be that he actually has the heart of a refined scholar, but ended up walking the path of a military general? That day, I was in my room embroidering a sachet for Zhao Yang. I had heard from Bai Yu that his birthday was approaching, and since I didn't know what to give him, I decided to embroider a sachet for him. When he arrived, I was studying the patterns. Hearing footsteps, I quickly hid what I was working on. Recently, Shen Changyao made contributions in the reform of the field and grain system. The Grand Tutor intends to marry his daughter to him, and it's likely that the Emperor will be asked to grant the marriage tomorrow. Now I could naturally get close to him. I took his hand and made him sit down, asking, "My lord, why are you telling me this?" Zhao Yang looked at me. "If you feel uncomfortable, I can call off this marriage tomorrow." I looked at him somewhat perplexed, pondering the meaning behind his words. Was he trying to test whether I still cared about Shen Changyao? "I have no reason to feel uncomfortable. Have you forgotten, Lord Marquis? It was you who said that from that day on, I have had nothing to do with this person. Who he marries has nothing to do with me," I said with a smile. "Not only does it have nothing to do with me, but I must also ensure that this marriage takes place. Li Yunqian must marry Shen Changyao. If she doesn't marry him, how am I supposed to enjoy the show?" Shen Changyao's mother was not a good person. She was barely literate, full of rustic cunning, and usually sharp-tongued and difficult to get along with. In the past, I had tolerated her repeatedly, both for the sake of convenience and for Shen Changyao. But Li Yunqian was the daughter of the Grand Tutor, a status even worthy of the Crown Prince, so she would certainly not let Shen's mother off easily. As for why Li Yunqian was willing to marry beneath her station, it was simply because she had long been infatuated with Shen Changyao. It was in the second year of my marriage to Shen Changyao that Li Yunqian fell in love with him at first sight. She even pressured him to divorce me and marry her instead. At that time, Shen Changyao was perhaps still naive and had not yet tasted the allure of power. He looked coldly at Li Yunqian, intertwined his fingers with mine, and told her to give up. He would love only me in this lifetime, and not even death would change that. Zhao Yang leaned in to look at me, as if trying to find something on my face, but his eyes reflected two small versions of me, both with a candid and smiling expression. I seized the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. He probably wouldn't refuse such a great marriage proposal. If he really does refuse, it means. Before I could finish, Zhao Yang snorted coldly, grabbed my wrist, and whispered softly, "There won't be such an opportunity." On Zhao Yang's birthday, the mansion remained unusually quiet. I was somewhat surprised. Given his influence in the court, I would have expected the threshold to be worn down by visitors once they learned of his birthday. Why was it so quiet now? Wu Mai then told me that his public birth date was fabricated, on September 17th, and today is actually his real birthday. Bai Yu is Wu Mai's older sister. She has a bit of a temper, but when it comes to her younger sister, she looked at Wu Mai with some annoyance. "Why do you tell everything? You're going to expose all of the Marquis's secrets." Wu Mai opened her round, bright eyes wide and retorted, "I'm only telling the madam, not anyone else. You'd better mean it. Last time you even told the dog by the corner that the Marquis doesn't like chestnuts. I'm just afraid I'll forget before I get to the mistress. Can't I use the dog to help me remember?" The summer heat was intense, and a large bucket of ice had been placed in the courtyard to cool the air. I found myself smiling as I watched the two sisters bicker. Bai Yu had now become my dedicated messenger, though I wasn't sure who had instructed her to do so. Whenever she had a free moment, she would tell me about the Shen family's affairs. For instance, the new wife of the Shen family was constantly at odds with her mother-in-law, to the point that Lord Shen didn't even want to return home anymore. I chuckled inwardly, thinking, of course, in my previous life, when Li Yunqian entered the household, I was the family's disgrace, someone everyone could scold at will. She and Shen's mother even had a shared target for their resentment. Now that I'm gone, it's only natural they'd turn against each other. I led Wu Mai and a couple of others to decorate the mansion modestly, birthday noodles, a birthday feast, and a few red lanterns, just to make a small gesture. Wu Mai leaned in close and whispered, "The Marquis will be so happy. No one has ever celebrated his birthday before. He's always been alone. It's wonderful to have you here, madam." When Zhao Yang returned, I was directing the servants to hang lanterns from the eaves. As I stepped back, I didn't notice the steps behind me. Just as I thought I was about to fall, he caught me from behind. I turned to look at him, and as I raised my eyes, a smile bloomed on my face. With a charming and radiant expression, I said, "My lord, happy birthday." He wrapped an arm around my waist, setting me down on level ground, and simply said, "Don't do something so dangerous next time." I lowered my head to glance at the step, which was less than half a foot high, and pondered just how dangerous it really was. I hesitated for a long time before handing over the sachet I had spent several days embroidering. The truth was, my needlework was so poor that what was meant to be a tiger ended up looking like a sickly cat due to a misplaced stitch. It simply felt inauspicious. As a result, Wu Mai scratched her head innocently and asked, "Madam, where is the sachet you embroidered for the Marquis?" Zhao Yang rummaged through the basket and found the sachet, examining it for a long time. "Did you embroider this?" I nodded. "For me?" I continued to nod. He looked for a long time before finally saying, "This rabbit is quite cute." "Oh well, a rabbit is a rabbit." Zhao Yang casually tucked the sachet into his hand and turned to lead me out of the mansion. I was somewhat dazed as I looked at the bustling street, only then realizing that it seemed like a very, very long time since I had last been out. The long street, stretching for miles. was adorned with lantern-lit mountains and colorful towers. Thousands upon thousands of lanterns flickered, casting a brilliant glow all around, the lively atmosphere bringing a sense of peace to the heart. Zhao Yang held my hand tightly as we made our way through the crowd of vendors to the edge of the Yuan River. In his other hand, he carried several Kongming lanterns, waiting by the side. According to him, the custom in his hometown was to make a wish on one's birthday, write it on a Kongming lantern, and release it into the sky. Zhao Yang handed me the pen and lantern, asking me to write a wish. I thought for a moment. Since it was his birthday today, I picked up the pen and wrote, "May the Marquis enjoy good health and live a long life." Zhao Yang took it and glanced at it, then expressionlessly tossed the lantern into the river. "Don't write about me," he said, "write about yourself." Holding the pen, I was somewhat puzzled. "But today is your birthday." He turned to look at me, his handsome face flickering in the moonlight. "From now on, every year, my birthday wishes are for you. I don't need them." Is this the fish taking the bait? Such deep, affectionate words were hard to imagine coming from a man as cold and hard as iron. I smiled and handed him the pen. "Who writes their own birthday wishes? If you don't mind, my lord, why don't you write them?" He stared at the pen for a moment, then turned his head and said coldly, "Write it yourself." It was then that I remembered I had never seen his handwriting before. Someone like Zhao Yang would surely write with strong, powerful strokes. Taking the lantern, I wrote a few more characters on it. I knew exactly what Zhao Yang wanted to see at that moment. I lifted the finished lantern in front of him and said cheerfully, "Look, Marquis, I've finished writing it." Zhao Yang looked at the words written above, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly, then quickly fading as if afraid someone might see. I looked up at the distant Kongming lanterns, like scattered stars, and tugged at the corner of my mouth. Of course, he was happy. What I had written above was, "May every day with the Marquis be like this one." On the way back, I insisted on taking Mengshi Lane because there was a place there that sold the most delicious apricot blossom glutinous rice cakes, and I wanted him to try them. But as we reached the alley entrance, Zhao Yang suddenly grabbed my arm, insisting I take a different route. No matter how much I tried to reason with him, he refused to budge. In the midst of our argument, a woman's voice cut in. I turned and saw a man and a woman standing under the lamplight. The speaker was Li Yunqian, dressed in red, with Shen Changyao standing beside her. He was staring intently at my and Zhao Yang's tightly clasped hands. I fell silent, letting Zhao Yang hold my hand, and whispered softly, "Let's take another path." Zhao Yang looked coldly at the two of them, tightened his grip on my hand, and was about to turn and leave. Li Yunqian called out to him, "I heard that the Marquis, who has always kept his distance from women, has been keeping a woman in his residence. It must be the one beside you. Truly a peerless beauty, no wonder she's managed to bewitch even the Marquis." Zhao Yang narrowed his eyes. Where did this dog come from, daring to bark in front of me? Li Yunqian's face stiffened as she looked at Shen Changyao beside her, but Shen Changyao seemed lost in thought and did not respond to her. Noticing Li Yunqian's actions, I instinctively asked, "Are you pregnant?" At that moment, Shen Changyao seemed to come back to life, cutting off Li Yunqian before she could speak. "Wife. Yunqian, it's late. Let's return to the manor." Li Yunqian looked at him with displeasure, instead breaking free from his restraint and walking toward the two of us. Zhao Yang raised his hand to shield me in front of him. "That's right, the pregnancy isn't far along, so I haven't dared to spread the news. My husband adores the child in my belly. Perhaps you should also hurry up and give the Marquis one." She leaned close to my ear, her voice so low only I could hear. To better capture his heart, after all, serving with beauty, when the beauty fades, so does the love. The things my husband discarded, he still clings to them so desperately. What a pitiful fool. I smiled. Right now, I was like a dog relying on its master's power. If you want to hit the dog, you still have to consider the master's face, don't you? I turned to Zhao Yang and said, Lord Marquis, this lady called you a worthless wretch. You, Li Yunqian stared at me wide-eyed, unable to speak for a long time. Zhao Yang had no desire to stay longer in this place. He cast a cold glance at Shen Changyao and said, Grand Tutor Li has grown old and become muddle-headed in court. It seems the daughter he raised has turned out just as ill-mannered. His words carried a deeper meaning. On our way back, I asked him, Lord Marquis, so that was Grand Tutor Li's daughter. To be honest, I still feel somewhat afraid of the Li family. Zhao Yang stopped in his tracks, frowning at me. Why, it's nothing, just some trivial matters, and they're all in the past now. Today is your birthday, so don't let these small things bother you. I linked my arm with his and pulled out a packet of apricot blossom glutinous rice cakes. Zhao Yang, you will investigate, won't you? With just a little digging, you'll find out that the second son of Grand Tutor Li once harassed me on the street and nearly dragged me into his residence. Will Li Yunqian's curses today and her brother's past mistreatment of me be enough to make you take action against the Li family? As long as the Li family remains standing, Shen Changyao, no matter how far he falls, will always have a chance to rise again. Before sending me away, he relied on the official position given by Zhao Yang, but since this position brought him the support of the Li family, it had to be eliminated. A few days later, Bai told me that Grand Tutor Li had angered the emperor. Out of consideration for his years of hard work, the emperor showed leniency and allowed him to resign and return to his hometown. Meanwhile, the younger members of the Li family in the court were all demoted. No one knew exactly how Grand Tutor Li had offended the emperor, but it was clear that the Li family had fallen. Although Li Yunqian was anxious at this time, as the wife of a minister, she still held a prestigious status. Even higher than her sisters in the family, she felt an indescribable sense of superiority and no longer focused on the Li family, instead concentrating on giving birth to her child and securing her position. I instinctively asked Li Yunqian in that alley if she was pregnant because I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, she became pregnant about a month after entering the mansion, and when she was pregnant, I was also diagnosed with pregnancy. I raised my hand and gently covered my abdomen. If nothing unexpected happened, thinking of my recent drowsiness, I had initially thought it was due to exhaustion from dealing with Zhao Yang, and for a moment, I hadn't considered this possibility. I steadied myself. This child could not stay. Its existence would only make me think of the pain from my previous life again and again, of the countless times I had wished for its death. It was merely the result of that night's medicine. Not the fruit of love between parents. It should not have come. Moreover, if I were to leave in the future, a child would only be a burden. In my previous life, I had secretly left the mansion and gone to the pharmacy to buy a prescription. But before I could do anything, Shen Changyao found out. By simply changing one ingredient in that prescription, I could have secretly aborted the child without anyone knowing. With Zhao Yang away, there was no one in the mansion to take charge. It was easy for me to brew a bowl of medicine. Wu Mei happily brought it to me, because I told her this medicine would regulate my body and help me conceive the Marquis's child as soon as possible. Staring at the pitch-black, bottomless bowl of medicine before me, I remembered the child from my past life who sank into the pond with me. It had never seen the light of day, never tasted the joys and sorrows of the human world, and was forever silenced in a place devoid of light. But now, must I personally destroy it? No, I pushed the bowl of medicine away. I can't drink it, not now. If I take the medicine and abort the child, Zhao Yang will surely find out. He'll know I did it intentionally, and all my efforts these past few months will be wasted. I've spoken so many words of admiration to him, yet I would be aborting his child. There's no justifying that. My revenge is not yet complete. My plan is not yet finished. I still need to wait a little longer, using dizziness as an excuse. I secretly consulted a physician outside the mansion. He withdrew his hand and was about to loudly congratulate me, but I stopped him. gave him silver, and made him change his diagnosis to a woman's ailment that shouldn't be disclosed. The child in my womb, just like in my previous life, is not one to cause trouble, quiet, well-behaved, and never a bother. I looked up toward the outside. The lattice window was half open, and the last rays of the setting sun fell neatly upon the window frame, casting the shadow of the wutong leaves into the room. When Zhao Yang returned at night, he looked at my face and asked, "Why have you lost weight? Are you not eating?" When I'm in a bad mood, I don't feel like dealing with him. So I lazily shook my head. He wasn't angry, but instead seemed a bit flustered, and said to me, "I'll send you a gift tomorrow." What? He didn't say anything more, only telling me there's a palace banquet tomorrow and that I should go with him. But some people at court have seen me before. Isn't Zhao Yang afraid of what others might say? The next day, I realized he was not only unafraid but utterly audacious. He held my hand and walked me past everyone, using his cold gaze to force their questions back down their throats, until they could only awkwardly offer their congratulations. Not long before, Zhao Yang had requested the emperor to bestow a marriage between him and me. He wanted to marry me, to make me his wife. Still dazed and unable to process it all, he had already led me past many people. With each person we met, he gently introduced, "This is my wife, Jiang Qingyu." I am still Jiang Qingyu. I looked up at Zhao Yang, whose expression at this moment was gentle and joyful. The murmurs of the crowd rose softly, and I happened to catch a few words. "Why does Lord Zhao's wife look so much like Minister Shen's deceased wife?" "You noticed it too. Could they be twin sisters?" "It's impossible, Mr. Jiang only has one daughter." "That's really strange." At the banquet, a few ladies who knew me were covering their mouths with handkerchiefs, whispering something in low voices. Standing among them was Li Yunqian. So it probably wasn't anything good. I didn't really care. Even Zhao Yang wasn't afraid of these rumors. So why should I be? After making a fuss in the hall for a while, Zhao Yang sent someone to take me outside for some fresh air, with Bai Yu following closely behind me. I stopped when I reached a waterside pavilion, my thoughts in disarray. Before I could sort them out, a person appeared before me. I watched him warily and silently took half a step back. Seeing this, Bai Yu stepped in front of me, logically speaking, with his flourishing official career and a beautiful wife by his side. He should have been radiant and full of energy, yet, the look he gave me was inexplicably gloomy. Is he treating you well?" Shen Changyao gazed at me. "Of course he is. Our Marquis is not someone you can compare to," Bai Yu said coldly, her face flushed with anger. Shen Changyao ignored her, looking straight at me. "Back then, he forced you to stay, didn't he? With his high position and power, and his obsession with you, were you afraid he would harm me? So you chose to remain by his side." I nearly laughed in anger. When had he become like this, so disgusting and contemptible? "Shen Changyao, I never knew you were such a self-absorbed and arrogant person. Did I praise you too much in the past, making you mistakenly believe that I could live and die for you, even abandon my dignity for you? No, it's not like that." He pushed Bai Yu aside, grabbed my arms with both hands, and said hoarsely, "I had no choice but to do this. I had to deceive myself. I regret it. Au, I was wrong. Au, please forgive me. Just this once. I won't dare to do it again." I was momentarily confused, blinded by power, and did such an unforgivable thing. "Come home with me. I promise I'll treat you as I did before. I'll love you well. I only love you. Au, let go." Bai Yu placed his sword against Shen Changyao's neck and warned coldly. Shen Changyao, his eyes red, took a step forward, blood seeping from his neck. He laughed maniacally. Let her kill me. Let her do it. Without you, I don't want to live even a single day." I watched him coldly, my expression calm. If I hadn't walked that path in my previous life, I might have truly been moved by his deep affection. What a pity. I raised my hand, intending to slap him, only to see him kicked to the ground by someone. The newcomer stood behind me, wrapping an arm around me. Lord Marquis. I looked at Zhao Yang. Shen Changyao, who had fallen to the ground, pushed himself up with both hands and stood, his gaze fixed on Zhao Yang behind me, and then he slowly knelt down, bending his spine, lowering his head with both fists clenched, pleading pitifully and humbly, Lord Marquis, Zhao Yang, I beg you, I will return my official position to you, I beg you. Please return my wife to me, I beg you. In the time I have known Shen Changyao, he has always been an extremely aloof and proud man. Once, someone offered a fortune for one of his paintings. But because that person had said something that displeased him, he endured the pain of being beaten with sticks and still refused to paint for him. But now, he knelt before me like a dog, offering the high official position he had always dreamed of, begging another man to return me to him, my fingers clenched tightly, my heart pounding as I waited silently for Zhao Yang behind me to speak. The man's voice sounded in my ear, deep and powerful, Shen Changyao, to you. She might be an object to be exchanged at any time, but to me, she is not an object, she is a person, my wife. To me, Jiang Qingyu is worth more than 1,000 pieces of gold, more than 10,000 cities. My heart felt as if it had been struck hard by a heavy stone. I turned my head to look at him and happened to meet his gaze in those pitch-black pupils. No, I restrained myself and stayed clear-headed. It wasn't like that. If he truly thought that way, he wouldn't have agreed to Shen Changyao's approach back then. He wouldn't have tacitly allowed Shen Changyao to use me as a bargaining chip in their deal. Yes, I must not fall again. Men are selfish and terrifying. Their tolerance often only exists when their interests are not threatened. Shen Changyao looked pained and suddenly rushed forward as Zhao Yang was about to take me away. Zhao Yang turned around, drew Bai Yu's sword, and was about to kill him. He was capable of it. Killing a second-rank official meant nothing to Zhao Yang. I stood in front of Shen Changyao, spreading my arms wide. Marquis, please don't. The tip of the sword stopped dangerously close to my side at an incredible speed. Zhao Yang roared, "Are you insane? Do you have a death wish?" I was also a bit scared, my back breaking out in a cold sweat. I was just about to say something. Shen Changyao grabbed my hand, lowered his head, and asked, "Are you? You still have feelings for me, don't you? You still care about me, right?" I knew it, I just knew it. The bond we shared since childhood, you wouldn't forget me so easily. Are you? I silently turned my gaze to Zhao Yang. He was also looking at me at that moment, his sharp and merciless eyes fixed firmly on me, as if waiting for an explanation. Yet, I remained silent. Zhao Yang threw down his sword, pulled me close with force, and gritted his teeth as he asked, "He treated you like that? And you still think of him, Jiang Qingyu? You are truly something, my lord." He cut me off. "Shut up, I don't want to hear it." Zhao Yang's entire body was tense, radiating a chilling murderous intent as he directly escorted me away from the palace banquet. Sitting in the carriage, I felt a bit guilty and kept staring out the window. Zhao Yang hadn't spoken to me since earlier, although he had always been quiet and reserved. He would usually try to come up with something to talk about when we were together. This was the first time he had kept a cold expression, closing his eyes and refusing to even look at me. If I hadn't stopped him earlier and let him kill Shen Changyao in a fit of rage, how dull that would have been. Blocking Shen Changyao in that critical moment was a calculated move on my part. Given Zhao Yang's current feelings toward me, letting him think I still had feelings for Shen Changyao wouldn't harm me. But he would definitely make sure Shen Changyao suffered, even if it's just refuting his words in court or assigning him deadly tasks. It could make Shen Changyao suffer immensely. Zhao Yang is someone who holds grudges and would definitely do such things. Suddenly, I thought of something and moved closer to his side. As soon as I got close to him, he shifted his position and moved away from me again. After repeating this a few times, he was forced into a corner and had no choice but to open his eyes and look at me, his expression cold and intimidating. "Marquis, When you asked the emperor to bestow this marriage and marry me today, were you just joking? Someone of your status deserves someone much better. How could I possibly be worthy of being the Marquis? I don't want to marry him. Zhao Yang lifted me up and sat me across from him, then propped his elbows on his knees, leaning forward to look directly into my eyes. The carriage had already entered the bustling market, and the lights from outside flickered in, casting faint shadows over his brows and eyes. Amid the lively clamor, he spoke, "I'm not joking, I will only marry you, and I only want to marry you. If you are unwilling, or if I cannot marry you, I will return to the north, fight there for the rest of my life, and in the end, I will likely die on the battlefield." I clenched my fist tightly and forced a strained smile. Is that so? The carriage suddenly jolted to a halt, throwing me toward Zhao Yang's side. He held me firmly in his arms. Yang Sheng's voice came from outside. "My lord, there's an ambush." The sound of arrows cutting through the air could be heard. Zhao Yang looked outside with a grim expression. "Hold me tight and keep your head down." He held me in his arms, and in just a few moments, we were outside the carriage. With one hand, he wielded his sword to cut through the rain of arrows, while the other hand protected me. A group of black-clad figures leaped down from the city wall, charging straight toward us. I tightly gripped Zhao Yang's arm, doing my best to make myself as small and inconspicuous as possible. The two sides fought more and more fiercely, and in the end, Zhao Yang's men had nearly wiped out all the bandits. I grabbed Zhao Yang's arm, gradually losing strength, and slowly collapsed to the ground, vaguely feeling something wet flowing from between my legs. When I woke up and opened my eyes, my hand was tightly held by someone. I moved slightly, and that person jolted awake abruptly. "You're awake. How do you feel? Does your head hurt or anywhere else? Can you hear me?" Zhao Yang bombarded me with questions while holding my hand, his face still covered with stubble. I remembered what happened before I fainted. My hand under the brocade quilt slowly moved to my stomach. "It's all fate. Perhaps this child should not exist in this world." Zhao Yang seemed to have just thought of something, speaking cautiously. "You're pregnant. It's our child." "What? The child is still there. The doctor said the pregnancy is a bit unstable and needs careful attention." "Ching, can you give birth to him, please? I know you prepared the abortion medicine, and no matter the reason you didn't drink it, just give him a chance. He's tenacious, he didn't die either time. Be a little kinder and let him stay. If you don't like him, I'll raise him alone after he's born, and you won't have to see him." I stared at the canopy above the bed for a long time without speaking, then turned my head to the side, a single tear disappearing into the pillow. Zhao Yang held my hand, continuously pleading, his tone extremely humble. From that day on, many more people appeared in the mansion. Wu Mai brought an old woman to see me. Her hair was streaked with gray, and she bowed to me before looking at me with a face full of affection. Wu Mei said from the side, "This is the Marquis's wet nurse." She had already returned to her hometown to retire, but the Marquis specifically sent for her to come back. Everyone in the mansion referred to this wet nurse as Nanny. I helped her up, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes, saying, "Good, very good. The Marquis is finally not alone anymore." Nanny was very skilled at taking care of people, meticulous, thoughtful, and knowledgeable. In the later stages, when the baby in my womb started to react, it was she who helped me through it. From that day on, Zhao Yang kept a row of physicians, both male and female, in the residence. He worried that childbirth was no easy matter for women, always feeling that no amount of preparation was ever enough. Wu Mei joyfully embroidered baby belly bands, shoes, and socks every day, making one little hat after another. She would then bring them to me, saying, Madam, look at these tiger hats I made for the young master and young miss. Aren't they lovely? Be careful not to strain your eyes. There's plenty of time ahead. If you embroider every day, you might wear yourself out." I said gently, It's fine. The children of the Marquis's household must wear the very best. These fabrics were all gathered by the Marquis from various places. Just touching them makes me happy. My hand rested gently on my abdomen, and I thought with downcast eyes. So this is how it should have been loved. It was wanted, not ashamed to be despised along with me. Later, the side room was filled with even more toys, with cradles and wooden chairs piled up in heaps, until one day, I noticed the various cuts on Zhao Yang's fingers and side, saying, "The baby won't need those things right after birth. There's no need to rush to make them." He pursed his lips, his body stiffening as he replied, "Am I putting pressure on you? I'm just so happy. I can't help myself. I'll be more careful from now on." I scooped a spoonful of soup from the bowl and drank it silently. For a moment, there was no sound in the room. A few days later, as the sunlight grew stronger, I calculated that the day from my previous life had arrived, probably at this very moment. That day at the table, I took the initiative to bring up court affairs. "My lord, has the court recently been debating over who to send to the Western Circuit to assist the Crown Prince in overseeing the disaster relief efforts?" Zhao Yang paused his chopsticks for a moment and said, "Yes." I gently traced the carvings on the bowl with my fingers and said casually, "I recall that Minister Shen has made quite a few achievements in matters of public welfare. Why has no one recommended him? Do you want him to go?" Zhao Yang said flatly. I smiled and replied, "Matters of the court are not for me to comment on. I've merely overheard a few things and spoken out of turn." Zhao Yang curled his lips into a faint, mocking smile, though it was unclear whether he was mocking himself or me. "Jiang Qingyu, I know you've never been sincere. I have no choice, but I won't force you either. As long as you remain by my side, we can coexist peacefully. So, you should know that I will listen to whatever you say. If you want something, you can say it directly. There's no need to test me in such a roundabout way." I composed my expression. I had grown accustomed to using schemes on him, to dealing with him falsely. Zhao Yang probably also knew the purpose behind my hovering around him. "Good," I spoke again, "Your Lordship. Submit a memorial to have Shen Changyao accompany the Crown Prince to provide disaster relief. In my previous life, a vice minister had accompanied the Crown Prince to provide disaster relief. And that assignment later became his death warrant. The Crown Prince was inherently stubborn and unwilling to heed the advice of loyal ministers. In the matter of disaster relief, he insisted on his own views. The vice minister, being of lower rank and too timid to speak up, had no choice but to let him proceed recklessly, which ultimately led to a civilian uprising. When the news reached the capital, the Crown Prince was merely reprimanded, while the vice minister was convicted of a crime and nearly had his entire clan implicated. If Shen Changyao were to go, firstly, he had always been outspoken in his official duty. The worst outcome for him would have been a demotion. However, that day I told the Crown Princess that Shen Changyao had once been in contact with the Duke of Zhengguo's household. As everyone knows, the Duke of Zhengguo stands behind the seventh prince, who is the strongest contender for the throne. The reason the Crown Princess is willing to listen to me is simply because the person behind me is Zhao Yang. Shen Changyao was removed from his official position, and behind this were the manipulations of various factions. Not only that, but he was also ordered never to enter the court as an official again. See, this is what makes it interesting. Ending it all with a single strike would be far too satisfying. If he were to encounter an opportunity like mine after death, that would be far too terrifying. Not only will I not let him die, I will make him live on without a shred of dignity. The court's verdict on Shen Changyao was only delivered 2 months later, and during those 2 months, his wife had long since disappeared without a trace. Some said she was frightened by Shen Changyao's case and rushed back to the Li family overnight, begging her parents to take her in, covered in dust and shame. Others claimed she had argued with Shen's mother at home, and in the heat of the moment, Shen's mother accidentally pushed her, resulting in the loss of both the 7 or 8-month-old fetus and the mother. As the first light of dawn broke, the scent of rice porridge wafted through the long, wide alley. On both sides of the street, vendors at steamed bun stalls and pancake shops were cheerfully calling out to passers-by. I held my waist and looked down at the man under the bridge, dressed in dirty white clothes with messy long hair. Who would have thought that just a few months ago, he was the widely praised, young and promising Minister of Revenue in the court? He held a slightly yellowed steamed bun in his hand. Lowering his head as if lost in thought, I patted the dog beside me, which I had trained for several months. Go, take back your food. The tall black dog dashed over, heading straight for the steamed bun in his hand. Shinchongyao was terrified, shielding the bun while fighting off the dog with a stick. He wouldn't have ended up so miserable otherwise, even if he had been dismissed from his post. With his talent and looks, what couldn't he have accomplished? But I won't let him have his way. No one in the capital dares to hire him. No one dares to offer him charity. Unable to evade the black dog, Shinchongyao simply threw the steamed bun away and slumped to the ground in despair. When the black dog ran towards me, he saw me, and I was smiling at him. He abruptly turned his back, lowering his head and covering his face. As if terrified that I would see him in his current state, I called out to him, speaking softly, "Shinchongyao, do you know why you've ended up like this today?" He remained with his back to me, his shoulders trembling slightly, and said nothing, only clutching that stick tightly. I continued, "It was me. Everything you have today is all my doing. I wanted you to live a life worse than death. Do you remember that now?" Shinchongyao's body stiffened. He slowly turned to look at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. He stood up, looking down at me. When he reached out his hand, the sight of his dark, weathered palms made him freeze instantly. And he quickly hid his hands behind his back in panic. "Are you hate me so much? Why?" I laughed out loud, my eyes stinging slightly. "You ask me why? Since you can't figure it out, then stay under this bridge and think it over. Think about it for a lifetime. Are you?" he called out to me, his eyes bloodshot beneath his disheveled bangs. I wanted to climb higher. If I climbed higher, wouldn't it benefit you too? At least those people wouldn't dare to look at you with such unrestrained eyes anymore. They wouldn't dare to bully me for my low status and small position, and covet you. After that night, I regretted it. I wanted to climb even higher, higher than Zhao Yang, just a little higher than him, and I could take you back. So, I followed the crown prince to provide disaster relief. I thought I would handle it as well as I had the previous times, turning my head to look at him. My gaze was cold and desolate. "You're still using these excuses to mask your thirst for power now. You truly disgust me." The Marquis's carriage was waiting ahead, with Zhao Yang inside. Step by step, I walked toward him. Behind me, Shinchongyao clutched his chest, coughed up a mouthful of blood, bent over, and stared unwillingly at that retreating figure. After returning to the residence that day, my emotions were too agitated. The child that should have been born at full term unexpectedly started coming early. The manor was instantly thrown into a flurry of chaos. As soon as the child was born, I sank into a deep, heavy slumber. The baby's cries rang out, and both inside and outside the room, voices of congratulations filled the air. When I woke up, Nanny he carefully held the child for me to see. "Madam, it's a young master. Please take a look." "Madam," I glanced at him, then turned my head away and whispered, "Take him away." "This." "Mother," he looked at Zhao Yang. Zhao Yang held a bowl of food in his hands, his voice calm. "She's a bit tired. Please take good care of the child." "Mother." He sat down, lowered his head to look at me, and continued on his own. "Since you don't want to see him, I took a look for you. Newborns are all wrinkly and a bit ugly. I can't tell who he looks like, but Mother said his eyes and brows resemble yours, and he'll look even more like you as he grows up. I am very happy. You probably don't want to hear any of this, so I'll stop here. I've arranged everything. For the next month, I'll stay in the residence to accompany you. We've found a wet nurse for the child, and Mother will take care of him. You just focus on recovering your health." The exhaustion and pain from childbirth still lingered, and with Shinchongyao's matter resolved, I felt somewhat lax. Zhao Yang said many things, and I listened in silence without responding. Zhao Yang stayed with me in the residence for several months. At first, he stuck by my side every moment, overseeing all my meals and even taking over Wu Mai's duties. Later,
He would sometimes go out for half a day, spending the other half in the residence. Besides taking care of me, he also looked after the child. That child, I had only seen it once on the day it was born and never again. Zhao Yang seemed to really like the child. At night, he would always tell me what the child had eaten that day, how many times it had smiled, and how beautiful it would become as it grew. He once tried to place the child beside me while I was asleep, but when I woke up, I resisted and asked him to take the child away. Since then, he never brought the child over again. After my body had fully recovered, I began to contemplate another matter. Zhao Yang trusted me greatly, and I could easily command the people in his household. If I wanted to escape while going out, it wouldn't be impossible. Before I could take any action, Zhao Yang came that day. At that moment, I had just gotten up from the bed, and he sat beside me, restraining me with one hand, forcing me to look at him. He pinched my chin, his thin lips pressed tightly together, his entire aura dark and terrifying, his gaze as cold and sharp as a blade, just like the first time we met. Qingyu, haven't you given up yet, Lord Marquis? What are you talking about? Your schemes, your manipulations, I've known about them from the very beginning. But I was willing. I once said that as long as you stayed by my side, everything would be fine. But if you try to escape, if you leave me, Qingyu, I will kill him. That tiny little child, I could smother him with just one hand. I looked at him with terror in my eyes, my lips trembling slightly. Have you gone mad? That's your child. Zhao Yang's fingers brushed against my lips as he let out a scornful laugh. So what? You don't love him? A child that can't keep you here is worthless. He pressed his lips forcefully against mine, grinding and crushing, until the taste of blood spread between us. I winced in pain, my brow furrowing. After a long while, he rested his chin on my shoulder, breathing slightly heavily, and whispered, "Don't go, Qingyu, I beg you." He realized what I intended to do. This Marquis estate was like an inescapable net. On one hand, he was forceful, on the other, he pleaded pitifully. When had Zhao Yang, the iron-faced and ruthless man, learned such tricks? The 5-year-old child was as delicate as carved jade, naturally intelligent. In the morning, after practicing horse dance with his father, he would study with his tutor. Everyone in the estate doted on him as if he were a treasure. From the day Zhao Jiyuan was born, Zhao Yang had never been absent. He knew exactly how many inches the child had grown and how much weight he had gained at each stage of his early years. A tall and sturdy military officer, learning to change diapers for the child at night, huddling in the kitchen studying recipes, and repeatedly checking on the child's meals. Zhao Yang raised the child very well. He was lively and energetic, yet sensible and reasonable, with a sweet and eloquent tongue. Zhao Yang said that he himself was clumsy with words, keeping everything hidden in his heart, which often led to him being at a disadvantage. He didn't want Zhao Jiyuan to suffer the same fate in the future because of his words. Zhao Jiyuan's father loved him dearly, but his mother often looked at him with distant eyes. Even so, he thought of getting close to me day and night. He would squat in the small courtyard, talking to the ants on the ground. Father says mother is sick, and a yuan must be good. When mother gets better, she can hold a yuan. Zhao Yang had raised him for years, so Zhao Jiyuan should have felt a deeper affection for him. Yet, day after day, Zhao Yang taught him to love and respect me, telling him of the hardships I had endured, saying that I loved him, that his mother loved Zhao Jiyuan. The chill has completely dissipated, and the warmth of spring is just beginning to rise. The garden is filled with vibrant red flowers and lush greenery, bringing joy to the heart. In the pond, the koi fish swim merrily, while a few fallen petals of begonia drift down, enticing the fish to chase after them. I sat beneath the tree, staring blankly at the green grass sprouting from the rocky cliff in the distance, a burst of life emerging from hardness and pressure. Not far from me, Zhao Yang and his son were, as usual, neither too close nor too far, reviewing their lessons. I turned to look. Little Zhao Jiyuan was lying on the stone table, following Zhao Yang's finger as he read aloud, while secretly glancing at me. When he noticed me looking back, he quickly turned his head away in a fluster, and the slight curve at the corner of Zhao Yang's lips cast a gentle aura over his stern face. Tall and imposing, he had been bending his head for a long time to accommodate Zhao Jiyuan, occasionally raising a hand to rub the back of his neck. My fingers tightened on my skirt, and after a long moment of looking down, I softly called out, "Ayuan." The voice was so faint it was almost inaudible. But the child heard it and immediately straightened up, his eyes shining as he looked at me. He didn't run over right away, but instead tugged at Zhao Yang's sleeve in disbelief. "Father, mother called me Ayuan." Zhao Yang turned to look at me. A falling blossom lingered on his shoulder for a moment before drifting down to the earth. He raised a slightly trembling hand and patted Zhao Jiyuan's head, saying, Go to your mother, let her hold you," in the courtyard. The song of the bluebird was melodious, the ripples on the pond shimmered, and a few peach blossoms vied for the beauty of spring. In the gentle spring breeze, little Zhao Jiyuan ran toward me, and behind him, the tall man stepped slowly across the spring-filled ground, following in his wake. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.